Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the IWC Big Pilot's Watch Double Chronograph reference 3778-01, 46 millimeters in primarily brushed stainless steel. This one's been around since 2012 when it merged the double chronograph tradition with IWC's Big Pilot's Watch tradition, both Schaffhausen's own innovations in the modern era, and both incorporated into this burly 17.5 millimeter thick case. Now, I'm going to mention that my wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters. Let's talk about the fit and the ergonomics first. Now, you can see the watch is thick, almost 18 millimeters thick. It stands high and proud above the wrist. I'd originally thought that perhaps the cupped shape of the case back might cause it to dig in a little bit and sit lower, but it really doesn't. Short of wearing an enormous winter coat with a very loose sleeve, this is going to be one to wear over your long sleeves, not so much underneath them. So, although it does have a rather formal white metal, black dial, black strap coloration, it is a pure utility watch in the classical sense, not something to wear to a dinner party unless your dinner party companions are equally adventurous. The bottom line is that this watch is comfortable. It's big. It might be awkward with a tight cuff, but it is comfortable. Although my wrist is small, you can see IWC keeps the lugs shapely but spare. They don't really extend too far beyond the flanks of the case, so while they have gorgeous definition, they don't actually have a lot of length to them. So while the watch is 46 millimeters, it's really not that much more than 50 millimeters from the extremity of the lug to the extremity of the lug, which makes the fit workable on a normal-sized wrist. Let's remember that this watch references a 1940s original that was 55 millimeters around, basically the size of a clock. That one was designed to be worn over a flight jacket at altitude. This one is designed to be a little bit more ground-bound, but it does have that classic IWC Pilot's Watch look, and unlike its predecessor back in the 40s, this one features a fantastic and wonderfully originally styled Santoni alligator leather on top and calfskin leather strap on the bottom. Now, Santoni uses this riveted vintage style look to evoke early aviation and the utilitarian heritage of the pilot's watch, but make no mistake, from the hand stitching to the squared off shoulders, the souplesse of the calfskin underneath, this is a very comfortable strap that really makes the experience of wearing the Big Pilot's Watch very easy on a smaller wrist such as my own. Remember, you're looking at 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, and I think if your wrist were even 6, that is 15 centimeters in circumference, you'd be able to wear this with style and comfort. Now, the case, I'm going to focus on its finish because we just talked about the fit, but the finish deserves a shout out. Around the flange of the bezel, right on this little crease, and the character lines on the shoulder of the lugs, there's a gorgeous chamfering to a high polish that contrasts with the longitudinal graining of the metal and the circular graining of the bezel, and it proves that IWC does not look at this as a utilitarian implement, but a high-horology piece that pays tribute to the utilitarian past of the company. Likewise, the chronograph pushers and the crown all finish to a high polish, very attractive, and of course, the IWC deployant clasp that comes with the watch, a combination of brushed detailing and polished, very sturdy, opens and shuts with a satisfying snick. It's the perfect complement to this vintage style high horology piece. How high is high? Well, let's take a look at the basic dial layout. Very familiar. This is the instrument style that IWC has used on the Mark and Big Pilot series since the beginning, inspired by analog aviation instruments, high contrast, large figures, very easy to read. But, of course, you've got the chronograph indications, triple register, value 7750 layout style with everything on either the center line or the 9 o'clock side of the dial, and a convenient day date, the everyday complication. It's amazing, even in this day and age of a phone that'll tell us anything you ever wanted to know. I still find myself referring to day date watches constantly for reference when writing emails, writing letters, when dating checks. It's more useful than you think. You're always going to reference it. I'm glad to have it here. But the watch has a hidden trick. And now I split the second, and the trick is revealed. This is a double chronograph. IWC pioneered the modern double chronograph back in the early 90s when its then watchmaker, a young Richard Habring, found a way to incorporate a Rattrapante or split-second chronograph into the traditional value 7750 automatic winding movement. The split second is perfect for an aviation watch because it allows simultaneous timing of two competitors in a race. For instance, a car race, or if you're watching planes rounding pylons at the Reno air races, it's equally good for that. If you want to slow it down and time sailboats and regatta, again, just as practical. It could even pay dividends at your kids' track meet. And of course, just for kicks, that flyback of the split-second hand to catch up with the first is always a crowd pleaser. It's fun to just play with, and it's a rugged movement, so in spite of the complication, this is an everyday wearable timepiece. You can't say that about all high horology. Now, IWC does include a screwed-on caseback and solid. In order to protect that IWC 79420 movement, it's encased in a full anti-magnetic Faraday cage. Soft iron insulates the watch against airborne electrical equipment, or, as I often like to say, the reality of the home office environment today. At home, we have high-powered entertainment systems, subwoofers, speakers, computers. You go to work, high-powered wiring looms, fax machines. You see all sorts of high-end electronics in the office environment today that would have been unthinkable back in 1940 when this look was conceived. Today, having that shielding has actually become more practical, not less, and that's one of the few ways in which traditional mechanical watch construction has sort of seen the times catch up to it. So, anti-magnetic, very practical for use in and around modern work and play environments. But it's also 6 ATM water resistant, which is unconventional for a pilot's watch. They usually feature somewhere between 2 and 5 ATM, but with 6 ATM or 200 feet of water resistance, you don't have to be afraid of getting this watch wet. I wouldn't go diving with it, but it's definitely surprising to see on something that's explicitly billed as a pilot's timepiece. Likewise, a screw-in crown offers an extra measure of protection. The watch also features an unconventional refinement that's shared by a few, at least explicitly. This watch features what IWC calls decompression protection or blowout protection. So if the pressure in a cockpit does drop rapidly and the watch suddenly finds itself with more internal pressure than outside the crystal, it's actually designed to safeguard against crystal ejection. So the crystal is specially fixed to safeguard against decompression blowout. And I can't think of a whole lot of other companies that make that claim. So that's another unique mark that sets this watch apart from those that merely look like pilots' watches and proves that IWC's pedigree in building professional watches is still as fresh as ever and in evidence in this IWC reference 377801 pilot's watch. Now a little bit more background on the caliber 79420. It is based on the value 7750 as I discussed. With the date, with the split-second chronograph, with the ability to hack the movement and stop the balance for synchronization when you pull the crown, it stops the seconds entirely. You can synchronize it to an atomic clock, a reference timer, or your buddy's watch. Now the split-second architecture is entirely of IWC's design, and it requires a thorough overhaul of the 7750 movement. So in many ways, although this watch is loosely based on the 7750, between IWC adding its own decoration, its own regulator, its own split-second chronograph mechanisms, its own winding rotor, there's not much that's left of the 7750 as shipped from ETA. So IWC, which is famous for finishing 7750s beyond recognition, look up the Destrero Scafusia if you want to hear more about that. The bottom line is that this can be considered in many ways a manufacture movement with a 44-hour power reserve, automatic winding, and in all honesty, the durability for which the 7750 movement is well known. This could be your only watch, provided you don't have to slip it under a French cuff. And if that sounds good to you, this IWC Big Pilot's Watch double chronograph, reference 3778-01, 46mm, just may be the pilot's watch you want.